The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Given the customary view that psychedelic drugs can blow a person's mind, it might seem counterintuitive that they've just been greenlit to help in treatment for mental illness. Tonight we'll find out about research that's underway and what promise such treatment might hold. Then, author and podcaster Roman Mars helps us see some of the brilliant yet often overlooked urban design that makes cities hum. It's Tuesday, February 23rd, and that's ahead on The Agenda. Health Canada recently granted a select few medical professionals and patients permission to use experimental drugs. Those drugs have actually been around, if illegal and taboo, for many years. So-called magic mushrooms and other psychedelics, it seems, could turn out to have some real clinical benefits. With us now to find out more, we welcome, in Port Townsend, Washington, Dr. Corinne DeBoer, Chief Medical Officer for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies Public Benefit Corporation. In Marathon, Ontario, Dr. Ryan Patchett-Marble, Assistant Professor at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine and a clinical advisor for the advocacy group Therasol. And here in the Davenport area of Ontario's capital city, Rotem Petranker. He's a clinical psychology PhD student at York University and co-founder and director of the Psychedelic Science Research Program at the University of Toronto. And it's good to have you three with us here tonight on TVO. We are going to focus, I know there's lots of different psychedelics out there, but let's focus today on psilocybin, which I gather is better known as magic mushrooms, and MDMA, which is better known as ecstasy. Ryan, to you first. Health Canada recently approved some patients to use these drugs. What are the circumstances under which it's okay to use them?
Yeah, so in August of last year, Health Canada approved the first 4 patients to possess and consume psilocybin magic mushrooms. Those first 4 patients had terminal illnesses. And since then, there's been 1 patient that's been approved that has what you might call life-threatening cancer, as the studies call it, which means cancer in remission. But most of the people that have been approved by Health Canada have a terminal illness. So it's been approved to treat specifically psychological existential distress at the end of life.
Can you help us understand more about what that means? Psychological distress near the end of life includes what?
Sure. Yeah, so it includes things like anxiety, depression, and then this existential distress includes things like hopelessness, demoralization, fear of death, that kind of thing.
And how does it actually help under those circumstances?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, I guess. There's different theories. There's different ways of looking at it, too. One of the things that the 2 main studies commented on is that, very interestingly, the people that have benefit from it, which was a substantial number in the studies, they almost all describe some level of mystical component to the experience. And what I mean by that is these people have these experiences that feel like, they use words like, everything is one, sacred experiences, transcendence of time and space. They have this quality, what we call noetic quality, where this experience feels like it's more real than ordinary reality. So they have these really powerful experiences, often described in mystical terms. And for some reason, that seems to lead to immediate, substantial, and sustained improvement in psychological and existential distress.
I think we're all going to find out over the next 25 to 30 minutes how little I know about this topic, starting with the fact that I mispronounced psilocybin. Clearly, my youth was a little more G-rated than a lot of other people's was, because I just don't know a lot about this stuff. So, Corinne, I'm glad we've got you here to help us understand it better. MDMA, for example, how does that affect somebody's brain?
So thanks for the opportunity to speak here, Steve. So to explain a little bit why we're doing, what we're studying at MAPS is MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. To explain a little more and answer your question, I need to go a little bit into the biology of PTSD and how the effects of MDMA relate to that. So as we know, PTSD is a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who experience an emotional trauma. One of the main focuses of PTSD and one of the main symptoms is hypervigilance, which means they're in a continuous increased state of alert. They're basically in the fight and flight mode, where a big rush of adrenaline is directed by the activity of the amygdala. And the amygdala are a part of the brain that are involved in emotional processing and also in memory. So what MDMA does, MDMA is a synthetic chemical. It has several effects on the body, and one of them is on the brain. And how it relates to PTSD, we know from neuroimaging studies that MDMA reduces the cerebral blood flow around the amygdala. And that results in increased mood and openness. And when the MDMA is provided with supportive therapy, as we do in our program with the therapists that are trained by our organization, the participant has the unique opportunity to go to the root cause of the trauma. And it has been effective. And I know we're going to talk more about the results as well.
We sure are. Rota, maybe you can come in at this point and talk about magic mushrooms and the impact they have on the brain.
Sure. So psilocybin, the so-called active ingredient in magic mushrooms, is very similar in structure to serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that is, I think, really well known. We have SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that are currently our frontline antidepressants, and it appears that psilocybin interacts with the same system. We don't exactly understand how and where in the brain they work, and there's still a lot of research that needs to be done. But the way it appears now, at least from more, I guess, specific reports from individuals, from anecdotal evidence, is that actually psilocybin does the opposite of what people report from SSRIs. I think that a lot of people who take current antidepressants report that they become distant from the negative feelings that they experience, the depression, the anxiety, whereas people who use psilocybin often describe more feeling connected to these parts of them that they dislike and perhaps suffer from.
Are you prepared then to say at this point that they are more effective than SSRIs are?
It is absolutely premature to say anything like that. They appear to be very promising, and in the limited scale studies that we have seen so far, the results are quite strong. But I think much more research is required before we can even accurately compare SSRIs and psilocybin.
Let me do one more with you, Rotem, and that is, I gather your specialty is microdosing. So explain that to us, if you would. How does that work?
Yeah, for sure. So microdosing is a practice of taking small subhallucinogenic doses of a psychedelic substance like LSD or psilocybin. And we actually don't know that it works yet. There is a real paucity of research on this subject, but it looks really promising because people are reporting that it's very, very useful for them in surveys that we've run. Thousands of people are saying that it helps with a variety of conditions, and it also helps their life just be better, feel better. It helps them flourish. It looks very, very promising, additionally, also because if it indeed works, when you take a very small dose of a psychedelic, it's supposed to not interfere with your daily life. So, for example, you could take a microdose and go on a TV interview, and that would not affect you at all.
Well, okay, I got to ask, did you just do that?
Oh, no, I didn't. But I'm just saying, it's one of the things.
You can't blame me for asking. You put it out there. Okay.
Absolutely.
Let me share this from the New York Times review from writer Michael Pollan's book. He's got a book out about psychedelics, and let's share this with our listeners and viewers right now. Many LSD or psilocybin trips, even good trips, begin with an ordeal that can feel scarily similar to dissolving or even dying. What appears to be happening in a neurological sense is that the part of the brain that governs the ego and most values coherence, the default mode network it's called, drops away. An older, more primitive part of the brain emerges, one that's analogous to a child's mind, in which feelings of individuality are fuzzier and a capacity for awe and wonder is stronger. Ryan, let me go to you on this, because you were approved by the Canadian government to use psilocybin yourself to develop therapy. Have I got that right? How accurate does that description sound to you?
That sounds very accurate. I think that it goes, as Roden was saying, it goes against what we're used to, which is normally when people have depressed or anxious symptoms, we kind of try to suppress it or get rid of it. And what it's doing is allowing it to arise into this open space where it can be accepted and to some extent heal. So that's one part that I'm reminded of with the quote. And the other part is the default mode network and the ego. The way they found that out actually was they had people doing these MRIs for other reasons. And when they were waiting in the MRI machine before the actual, whatever the test was that day, they noticed a certain part of the brain lit up. And that was the default mode network. So that's the part of the brain that's there when you're ruminating. Like, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? I said the wrong thing to that person. I really should do that next time. And so it's the part, perhaps, the neurological basis for self. And it seems to make sense that if that's true, that if you quiet that part of the brain, then maybe you feel more connected with others. And that connection can be really, really powerful.
Any concerns yourself personally about using it?
So yes, it's a really good question and a really big question. The studies that were done, and this is really, really important when you talk about this topic, they did a lot of things. So first of all, they screened people. They did 8 hours of preparation on average before the experience. They had trained therapists, and they did it in a conducive setting. So all of those things were done to obtain the results of the study that I mentioned earlier. And if you try to take shortcuts, it's unclear if you'll get the same results. So, I guess one example would be the polar opposite. You didn't screen someone, so you used somebody that had bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. You used untrained therapists in a non-conducive setting, like, say, a dark alleyway, with untrained therapists. You can imagine that's not going to go very well. And I think that that's really important to note, that the effect is not just from the drug and the dose, at least macrodosing, as I'm talking about, to contrast to what Rotem said. Those other things are critical. And I think I'm worried that as this moves forward, people might lose sight of that and forget all that other stuff that goes with it. It's not magic in itself, despite the name. It's not like, take this mushroom, don't worry about anything else, and you'll see the nature of the universe. It doesn't work that way. And I think that's really important to keep reminding people of.
Okay, one more for you. How do you plan to use your personal experiences to help patients in that regard?
So that's a really good question, too. So the short answer, I have my exemption. I haven't used it yet. It would be done in a setting with trained therapists and that kind of thing. The idea is that this is very different from other treatments that I give. It's not like prescribing antibiotics for a urinary tract infection or chemotherapy or something. The idea here is that my role as a therapist would be to help the person navigate through this terrain. And it's really unfamiliar terrain. The people that describe it, that go to these states of consciousness, they use words like ineffability. They say, you can't really describe it with words. So me as a therapist, how am I supposed to read about this place that can't be described with words and then help my patient navigate through there? So the idea is, just like any other guide through terrain, that the people guiding have some experience with that terrain.
Okay, Corinne, I guess in the interest of treating all the guests equally, I probably need to ask you as well. Have you ever tried the stuff that we're talking about here tonight?
Well, thanks for asking, Steve. My personal experience is not important. What is important, though, is being able to share the results of our phase 2 clinical trials. So we recently published the long-term follow-up of our pooled phase 2 studies, which were 6 different studies of a total of 105 participants with PTSD, with an average duration of PTSD of over 200 months. And I'm happy to report that at the 12 months after the last dose, 67% of those participants did not qualify for a PTSD diagnosis anymore. And an extra 20% reported a reduction of their clinical symptoms. The other interesting part about that is that compared to the end of the study, 56% reported a loss of diagnosis. So even after the study is ended, more than 10 months later, participants continue to improve. And that is compared to 23% of placebo participants who did not qualify for a PTSD diagnosis at the end of the study.
Okay, 2 quick follow-ups with you, Corinne. Number 1, that was such an impressive, skillful dodging of the first part of my question. I'm actually going to let you get away with that because that was so good. And second of all, can we conclude, 2/3 reporting improvements, it sounds to my untrained ear like you would qualify that as a success. Would you qualify that as a success?
Absolutely. And I think it's also acknowledged by the health authorities because we have breakthrough therapy designation, which means the FDA provides support and will review our application in an expedited fashion. So in Health Canada, we just applied for a special access program in Health Canada as well. So they're very eager to look into that.
Okay, let's go over to Rotem now. What are you seeing in terms of findings so far, and whether you're prepared to call what's happening a success?
Sure. So I think because my area of expertise is microdosing, and there's virtually no lab studies that have been published. There have been very few. I think it's really early to say whether or not microdosing even does anything. It's quite possible that the effects that people are experiencing from microdosing are just the placebo effect. That being said, I would like to tell you just briefly about the three main benefits and three main drawbacks that we've been hearing from people about. And so the first most commonly reported benefit that people are reporting from microdosing is improved mood. Almost a third of our participants, and these are many thousands of participants, in different surveys have reported that their mood is better when they microdose. And then second is improved focus. So this is also very promising. People are able to focus on what they're doing more. And finally, improved creativity, which is not surprising because I think these substances have been known to assist with creativity for at least decades. In terms of the drawbacks, though, I think by far the most commonly reported drawback is that these substances are illegal. And I think that this also, it's funny, when you asked Corinne if she's ever used these substances, it's funny that we feel comfortable talking about it on this forum, whereas if these were other substances that are also illegal, we would certainly not be willing to report our use of these substances on TV. So I think a lot of people who actually use these substances, a large barrier to their comfortable use is just the illegal status. So people are reporting that they have to deal with black market. They have to test their substances because they don't know what's in them. And they don't know how much to take because the supply is not consistent. So I think that this is more perhaps a failing of public policy than a property of the substance itself. Additionally, other very real drawbacks are physiological discomfort that people were reporting, kind of feeling hot and cold or gastrointestinal issues. And yeah, finally, just other calls for more research because they don't know if these substances interact with their existing medication. They don't know if there are health risks involved. So I would say that more often than not, people were just reporting that there's some physiological discomfort, but people are also reporting the same thing for just, off-the-shelf drugs that they can get.
Well, Ryan, that is one of the things I wanted to check out with you, in as much as if you can have permanent positive change as a result of the appropriate use of these drugs, can you have permanent negative change as well if you don't do it properly?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So I think yes, and that's why it's important we take into account that the research had those safety precautions, meaning, adequate screening, trained therapists, all that kind of thing, because people describe it being so powerful that it does come back later on. And that was one of the things that led to a lot of the fear about psychedelics, was the idea of a bad trip. You'll have terrifying trips or flashbacks for the rest of your life. 8 doses of LSD and you're legally insane. These were the things that were being said. And if we look after how it's administered, so in the psychedelic literature, we talk about set and setting. So that's mindset, which is the preparation of the patient, expectations, the personality of the patient. Those things feed into the experience. And then the setting refers to the external stuff. So where is it being used? Who's around? That kind of thing. So it's really important we address those things to try to minimize the risk of having, terrifying flashbacks or something like that. I think it's really important to mention, though, too, that discomfort is not abnormal. And it's actually not something to look down upon, because actually in the Johns Hopkins study, for example, which was the biggest one, it was 51 patients with life-threatening cancer. The odds of psychological discomfort, or the percentage, was around 1 in 3. And same with anxiety during the experience. And they don't view that as a bad thing. Again, it's the idea is that the discomfort is rising up that you've been suppressing into a place of acceptance. And that's actually part of the healing process, or at least that's one way of looking at it.
Corinne, I wonder if there are people for whom, under no circumstances, this ought to be considered as an option.
Well, we're working through the medical model at MAPS PVC, and the other part of our organization, MAPS, is working through harm reduction. We're talking about a different type of use, and rescheduling of the drug is actually very important, because currently it's a Schedule 1. Basically, there's no approved use besides outside of clinical trials, and those are for drugs with a huge percentage of abuse potential. For this modality to become available, the DEA needs to deschedule the drug. And I think I want to also really stress the importance. This modality is not for everyone. And another important takeaway message for your viewers: MDMA will never be a take-home medication. It will always be the integrative model of MDMA-assisted therapy.
Rotem, let me follow up on this angle with you. And that is, I think this is an uncomfortable subject for a lot of people, in part because they have heard the stories about 50 and 60 years ago about how the CIA, sort of without people's consent, imposed the use of these drugs for testing purposes to see the reaction they would have. I think it was called the Montreal experiments, because a lot of it happened up here. And I wonder how much you think that affected people's views of the reputation that these drugs have.
Certainly, yeah, I think that's a fair question. And I think that, that it's likely that the misuse and the way the model of experimentation was back in the 50s and 60s had an impact on the way things are now. And the subsequent criminalization of these substances. And I think that it's important to remember that the setting is different now. These substances are currently being studied mostly by healthcare providers who are acutely aware of the current mental health crisis that the Western world is experiencing. And additionally, it's being bankrolled by corporations that see a lot of profit possible here. So I think currently it's being pushed very hard to show that these are the new mental health wonder drugs and that there's nothing to worry about at all. And for me, as someone who studies microdosing, this is particularly worrisome because I think in other models, you take a large dose of these substances, or maybe a few large doses, and that's probably it for life, maybe for now. But when people microdose, they do it once or twice a week for extended periods of time. And we don't know what the possible health outcomes of that behavior is. And I worry that in the current setting, where a lot of people have a lot to gain, some of the less convenient results will be swept under the rug.
Well, let me follow up with Ryan on that. Are there ethical concerns that some patients nowadays may not be, intellectually capable of consenting in an informed way to the use of these drugs? What do you think?
I guess it depends on the indication you're looking at it for. I think it's important to know, I don't think this has come up explicitly during this discussion, but in the 50s and 60s, there was like 1,000 clinical papers looking at 40,000 patients for a pile of indications. So this is not brand new. So it's not like everybody is a guinea pig. I think it's important that when we do start out with the clinical trials, we start out with people that are able to consent, where the benefit looks like it most outweighs the risks. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that it makes sense that the first major studies with classic psychedelics like psilocybin were looking at life-threatening cancer and the use in that population. I think they've been really favorable so far.
Okay, Kareem, we talked earlier about the standard antidepressant drug, they call it, the SSRIs. And I know that a few decades ago, there was great hope that they would represent a huge breakthrough in the way that, for example, depression and anxiety were treated. And, in some cases, yes, and in many other cases, they've found to be no more effective than the average placebo, for example. I wonder whether you think we need to similarly temper our expectations for what these drugs can do in the same way that we've had to with SSRIs.
Well, I agree with you, Steve, and thanks for asking. So we carefully need to, even after approval, we need to carefully select the best patients for where this modality might work. There will be in our label some contraindications. For example, we know there are effects on the body of MDMA that causes an transient increase in blood pressure. So it's, from a medical perspective, not okay for everybody as well. And from a psychiatric perspective, people need to be carefully screened. And I also want to follow up. So what we're doing at MAPS is we're actually finishing off a lot of the good research that's been done in the 50s and 60s. We need to do a lot of training and advocacy work. and explaining to patients what our modality can do and cannot do. The other really important distinction I want to make, Steve, with SSRIs are taking most of the time long term. And if patients taper them down, their symptoms are coming back. Our modality is intended to be used for a relatively short course of 3 months of 3 different sessions, potentially after approval, a little bit more or a little bit less for each individual patient. But as I shared with you with the long-term follow-up, even if the modality is not given, the participant is able to go through their trauma by the insight they've gained with the MDMA-assisted therapy session. So hopefully it's going to be long-term use, but we don't know. Long-term effects, we don't know how it's going to look extra long-term. So we're developing those studies as well. And I agree with you. It's not going to be for everybody, but we are very hopeful that at least it's another opportunity to treat PTSD that may be more effective in a field where basically nothing happened over the last 20 years.
Well, let me get Rotem on that. I know crystal ball gazing on this kind of thing is very difficult to do, but using your informed speculation on this subject, do you think that we are going to be hearing about and potentially using these drugs a lot more in the decade to come?
Certainly. I think that legalization for a lot of these substances is right around the corner, maybe a matter of a few years, especially for MDMA. Like I clearly know less than Corinne about this, but it is my impression that MDMA is currently making huge strides towards legalization, at least in the States. And I think that in Canada as well, I think that the health providers and the institution is very receptive, because truly the results are extremely promising, extremely encouraging, and there are some people that are doing incredible work. So I think it's really a matter of time before these substances are available for consumption. I don't know under which conditions, which is a huge question that is left unanswered.
Ryan, last 30 seconds to you on the same question. You think we're going to see more of this going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the term psychedelic renaissance is happening. I think that there's a paradigm shift happening in medicine, in our approach to mental health. And I think based on the studies, at least in my medical training, I was never taught about spiritual health. And what's being suggested with macrodosing, at least with these life-threatening cancer patients, is that a substance like psilocybin can lead to an experience which can lead to lasting change. And part of that experience is, it's hard to use the word other than spiritual. So that has a huge potential. And a big part of that is connection. And if you look at depression, anxiety, addiction, post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of them have a huge underlying element of disconnection. And so feeling more connected in a lasting way is really powerful. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Well, I don't know anything about magic mushrooms, but I do know about magical conversations, and that was one. So thank you all three for joining us tonight here on TVO. Corinne DeBoer from Port Townsend, Washington, Ryan Patchett-Marble in Northern Ontario and Marathon, and Rotem Petranker within spitting distance of this studio. Good to have you all on TVO tonight.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Cities are often defined by their hustle and bustle, an organized chaos of sorts that works thanks to unspoken rules and, as our next guest explains, hidden acts of genius. Roman Mars is the creator and has hosted for more than a decade now the podcast 99% Invisible. There he's drawn our eye to things we encounter and rely on all the time, but barely notice. They're even more noticeable now as Roman has put some of his findings in a new book. Co-authored with Kurt Kolstad, it's called The 99% Invisible City, a field guide to the hidden world of everyday design. And Roman Mars joins us now from Berkeley, California, and we're delighted to have you on the program. How are you managing during this pandemic, Roman?
I'm doing okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to hear it. Your podcast, of course, covers all sorts of topics, but we're going to focus on the invisible parts of a city right now, since that's what the book is all about. And let's start with an excerpt from the book. Sheldon, if you would, the graphic, please. The truth is that the mundane objects we pass by without noticing or trip over without thinking can represent as much genius and innovation as the tallest building, the longest bridge, or the most manicured park. So much of the conversation about design centers on beauty, but the more fascinating stories of the built world are about problem solving, historical constraints, and human drama. How do you learn to recognize the brilliance of those mundane objects?
I mean, it takes a little bit of practice to sort of pay attention to things that you're meant to ignore. But I think the first layer that's fun is to just pay attention to the information layer that's right there in front of you. There's a lot of words on streets, markings, graffiti markings that indicate utility that are underneath the streets, and just pay attention to those, and then get curious, read every plaque, and start from there, and then explore.
You really do have to think that through, though, because most of us are just completely hustling and bustling and not giving any attention to that at all, right?
It's totally true. And it's also meant to be ignored. It's not meant to call your attention. Good design tends to be invisible. That's hence the name, 99% Invisible, as the name of a design podcast. And so you're not supposed to notice it. But the world is so much richer when you do, because you realize that you're kind of in the warm embrace of a bunch of people thinking about things before you anticipate them.
Well, let's do a couple of examples here. And I love the one about the stoplights. The one in Syracuse, New York, the stoplight, where instead of red at the top and green at the bottom, they've got them reversed. You want to explain why?
Well, when stoplights were introduced, it wasn't really a common practice or, convention to have necessarily red on top and green on the bottom. And when it was introduced into this Irish neighborhood of Syracuse, New York, they took great offense to Unionist red being above Republic green. And so they would smash the lights until they reversed them. And that sort of war went back and forth with the powers that be and the people, until finally the city relented and kept the green above the red, and it's memorialized in Syracuse, New York, and there's a park and a plaque that tells the story of it.
Who knows, or who knew rather, the stoplights could be so political, but apparently they got away with it there.
It's embedded in everything. Like, our values are embedded in the things we build, and some people can notice it and some people don't, and it's really fascinating to take the time to think about it.
How about in Japan? They've got something different going on there too with stoplights.
Yeah, well, that actually comes from something a little bit different. Like, they just don't really have the same words for different colors, and so when they're talking about blue kind of includes what we would call green. And so when sort of international standards of what light should be were sort of spread across the world, they kind of made their choice of green light kind of the bluest green light possible, so that it could conform with their language and concept of green, and still be green enough so that people traveling internationally would know what to do if they saw a pretty blue light in front of them.
Roman, we're going to bring a picture up right now that everybody has seen before, but I suspect no one knew where they came from. Now, this is the kind of thing that these inflatable things that you see at car dealerships or whatever. How did that whole thing get started?
Well, this is really fascinating, because these are things that people often sort of view as garish, things that, should be banned in cities. In fact, the city of Houston, Texas, banned them for a period of time. But they're sourced from a really interesting artist named Peter Menschel from Trinidad and Tobago, and he was designing, the sort of Olympic Games ceremonies, and wanted to represent the sort of the movements and dance of his native Trinidad and Tobago. And he was a puppet artist, and he devised this idea of the fans and the sort of balloon men moving around and shaking. And so, there are these beautiful things that have a real rich cultural heritage that were sort of then sold and co-opted and turned into sort of things that we find as visual pollution a lot of the times. But, if you pay attention to the story of it, you notice that they have, something beautiful to say, even if maybe they're distasteful to you personally.
Let's talk about the roads, because roads today are pretty obviously for cars first and foremost, cyclists maybe second, pedestrians not really at all. It wasn't always thus, right? Once upon a time, it was backwards. How did that happen?
Absolutely. I mean, roads have existed for millennia to connect cities and connect people within cities, and they were really multimodal. They had all kinds of uses, and like you said, they had, there's pedestrians, carts, horses, trolley cars, and then eventually automobiles. And they all used to share this space, and it was pretty chaotic. And then the dominance of cars sort of cleared the way of everything else. Like, all the trolley lines were ripped up. People had to cross at designated intersections. And this is fine. Like we make these choices, we decide cities have to work a certain way, and we really geared cities around cars for a long, long time. But what I think is really interesting, especially now during the sort of pandemic time, when we're needing some more shared outdoor space with some space between us, people are taking over roads and closing down roads. There's less traffic and getting out there and realizing that roads don't have to be just for cars, that was a choice. They're not like inherently made that way. We can choose to make them more useful for more purposes, and it's worth experimenting to see if cities today could use a little bit more room to make roads for all kinds of things, including bikes and people and cafe seating.
Well, I know we have an organization here in the province of Ontario called Share the Road, and it's very much designed to get automobiles and trucks and public transit and pedestrians and cyclists all understanding that this is not an exclusive arrangement, right? We have to share the roads. Everybody's allowed to be on there.
Absolutely.
But it's a constant fight, Roman, and I wonder whether better road design is possible to enable that sharing to happen better.
Well, there's all kinds of experiments that you could consider. Like there's the Naked Streets movement, and this is sort of a counterintuitive design solution that may be what they've tried is, rather than having all these signs and like crosswalks and stoplights, that one of the things that makes streets safer is to take all that stuff away and make it so that people have to kind of negotiate with their eyes and paying attention to all the stuff that's happening. And so there'll be no stoplight. People cross when they want to, but they have to make eye contact with the driver, the bicyclist. And I think people know this inherently. There's a kind of friction when you use like a roundabout, for example. It can cause some tension, but roundabouts tend to be safer than traffic light mediated intersections. And it's the same kind of principle that you increase some friction, you make people have to sort of bump into each other, and it counterintuitively makes the thing safer. So there's lots of things to try. And the main thing about the book is about all these design decisions, about top-down designers and bottom-up interventionists. That sort of creates the conversation that is a city. And a successful city is a conversation between all those forces to try to make it serve all of us in lots of different ways.
You mentioned the book. Let's do another quote from the book. Sheldon, you want to bring up this next quote, please? People tend to use what's given to them. Presented with wide open spaces, drivers will go faster. Intentionally closing off space by adding trees and other landscaping along the side of the road may make a driver a little more anxious, but also more cautious, which can in turn make roadways that much safer for everybody. And Sheldon, I wonder if we can skip right to the picture, the image of the bicycle on the road and these Sharrows. We're going to see this picture in a second. Sharrows are the bike symbols that aren't in their own lanes, but rather sharing lanes with cars. Roman, how did this come about?
Well, what's interesting about them is they often came about kind of through guerrilla intervention. People would just paint those symbols to make it so people shared the road. So in my home area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the Golden Gate Park, people just made a bike lane themselves, and it was so successful and so useful that the city began to adopt it. It doesn't always turn out that way, but that's sort of the key to cities is that there needs to be enough room for people to act and shape it to their will, because it is about a collective enterprise of us getting together and do this crazy thing and live on top of each other. And so Sharrows were really part of that evolution of us, deciding that, people need these dedicated lanes, and the more dedicated they are, the safer they can be. And it's worth playing with our roads to sort of accommodate that. Do
you feel that's an idea that can catch on in cities and towns across North America?
I think it can. It really just has to be, driven by the people and hopefully have their avenues of their voice to be heard. You can do this sort of yourself in a DIY way with paint. It doesn't always work out really well, but you can also do it by, just engaging with the city council in all kinds of ways. But the key to a successful city is that they pay attention to what the populace needs.
Let's talk about building. And once again, we're going to go back to your book for another quote. It may seem surprising, you write, but after a century of concrete, glass, and steel dominating urban landscapes, wood is making a comeback thanks to new mass timber building technologies, fire safety innovations, and a growing interest in eco-friendly design. I do hearken back to when Sidewalk Labs came up here from New York City up to Toronto, Ontario, and planned its smart city. And part of a very significant part of its futuristic look was going to be the use of timber for their buildings. And I know a lot of people were scratching their head up here saying, what, buildings made out of timber? Why do you think it's making a comeback?
Well, mainly because, it's a technology. I mean, we don't think of it as a technology, wood, but it is, and it has been developed. And these sort of cross laminate, they basically, if you think about press board, kind of like cross laminate, so that the strength of the wood is like it's cut into pieces and run across each other and then glued together. It's incredibly strong. It's incredibly safe. It is a renewable resource, within reason. You can certainly clear a forest and destroy it, but it's a renewable resource within reason. It tends to have it doesn't have to travel quite the same way if there's a local forest. It really is a impressive technology, and we sort of gave up on it during the time when fires were really rampant in cities in the early 20th century, and this thing, concrete and steel construction was sort of taking over. But it's making a comeback because it's really developed, and it serves our needs pretty well. It's a carbon sink. It does all these things that are really good for the environment. And concrete has real problems when it comes to its sort of carbon use, and so people are exploring it, and I think making beautiful buildings with it, and it'll be fun to see how people react, because they don't think of wood. If they see a wood skyscraper, it's really stunning.
Let's talk about the cloud. I suspect most people think the cloud is in the sky. You tell us the cloud is actually in the water. What's that mean?
Well, the funny thing is like when we introduced the idea of the cloud to people, it was really confusing, and we thought of computers as being, computers, like physical objects that we're used to seeing. But in fact, the infrastructure that makes the cloud are pretty much physical computers and cables that make all this stuff possible, including tons of fiber optic line that runs across the ocean, on the ocean floor, like up to 25,000 feet below the surface. And we dig trenches, we throw these thin fiber optic cables down there and let nature cover them over. And a huge part of our, like 99% of our international data traffic is handled by wires underneath the ocean.
Okay, let's talk urban wildlife, because anybody who's watching this or listening to this who lives in a big city certainly has an impression, for example, of pigeons as animals that are good for, I suppose, feeding in the park and pooping on statues in your car. But presumably there was a time when they were seen somewhat differently. Do you want to take us to that time?
Yeah, well, when pigeons were introduced in North America and Canada, actually, in the 1600s, they were sort of gifts. They were, fancy people would exchange them as presents, and there was no real discernible difference between, and there still isn't, between a pigeon and a dove. They were really just names that we call different animals in the Columbidae species. And as they became more common and take root in different cities, all of a sudden, doves were the fancy, nice things, and pigeons were the dirty and infesting pests. And it really is just up to us to decide if our cities, if you view them as invaders or beautiful doves.
Well,
they're a funny thing. We fight them a lot with spikes and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of invaders, how about squirrels? Once upon a time, squirrels weren't omnipresent in cities, and now they surely are. How did that happen?
Well, that happened by design. I think we always crave, nature in our cities, and we've tried different times to bring squirrels in in the 1800s. But at the time, our parks were designed differently. Mostly parks were, large grassy areas for maybe even grazing your livestock or playing games. And it was Frederick Law Olmsted and the park design, landscape design of, streams and rock outcroppings, and most importantly, oak trees, and making very natural parks that made it so that when we introduced squirrels, they finally had a food source in acorns and took root. And these were really deliberate attempts. They tried to introduce squirrels in the 1840s to Philadelphia. They did not take off. They introduced them to New York City in 1877, and they finally took a hold when Central Park became kind of the type of park it is. And then introduced around the world after that. I just always find that kind of amazing that we think of this as nature kind of does its own thing when it comes to how it sort of interacts with our cities. But we really tried with squirrels, and we tried multiple times until it finally took hold.
Well, how about the law of unintended consequences? Because did I read this correctly? As many as 20% of the power outages that take place in North America are due to squirrels? What's that about?
Yeah. Well, they chew on things because their teeth grow all the time, and they chew on power lines, and they really do interact poorly with our electrical infrastructure.
Reacting poorly, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, okay. I would like to take advantage of your being here to ask you, metaphorically and virtually, of course, to ask you about flags, because you did a TED Talk not that long ago about flag design, and you love our flag, which I'm glad to hear. We love our flag too. It's not as old as your flag, but it's a good flag. And
great flag.
It's a great flag. Okay, thank you. We wanted to show you, and you'll see them on your screen there, some flags of some local municipalities within a couple of hours drive of our studio, most of them anyway. And I want you to really give us your best critical analysis of these designs. And I don't want you to be affected by the notion that people living in these communities are actually watching you right now. So, Roman, no pandering. You got to tell it like it is, okay?
I will. I'll do my best.
Very good. Okay. Can we have the first one up, please, Sheldon? This is the flag of the city of Toronto, with, of course, the red maple leaf in the middle, and then sort of a T that looks kind of like the shape of Toronto City Hall, which is a beautiful futuristic thing. What do you think of this design?
I like it. I'm a fan of this flag. I think it's really interesting that it's framed in a certain way, like it kind of doesn't work with the elements taken away, like it really, to make the shape of Toronto City Hall, like it has to be framed a certain way. The one thing I would change about it is I think that the blue next to the red in the top of the maple leaf, I think it should have a fibration, like a white line between it, because I think that the a deep blue next to a deep red makes your eye jitter a little bit. If you notice, it looks a little fuzzy when the blue hits the red. I would make a little bit of a white line, and I think it would be a little bit better, but otherwise I think it's great. It's
interesting you like it so much, because I can tell you this flag's been around for 50 years. Nobody can identify it. Nobody knows this is the flag of the capital city of the province of Ontario. It hasn't caught on.
It's worth, I think one thing that is interesting, and this happens in the US as well, is that your country flag is so great that it's hard to sort of get above that, and have like a municipal flag that people really rally around. But I think that's a good one. I think that, I think you should pull it out and use it more.
Okay, here we go for the second one. This is the city of London, Ontario, Canada. Your thoughts?
Okay.
That's not a good start. I can tell.
Well, it looks a little bit like a bank logo to me, for one thing. But the most important thing is it has the words on it. Flags can't have words, because flags fly in the air in three-dimensional space, and they have to be, taken in on both sides. And so words backwards on the other side of the flag don't work. So if you took the London, Canada off of it, you'd get really, really far into the process of making it a better flag. So that's the first step. I find the shape really interesting. I have not seen like that type of like the thing on the hoist. That's the hoist is the side of the flag that connects to the flagpole. That green shape is really interesting. So I think you could take the elements and kind of move them around a little bit and make something really special. But first thing first is to get rid of the words.
Well, a couple observations there. London is known as the forest city, so the tree makes sense. And
totally.
And the second thing is London, once upon a time was the insurance capital of at least Ontario, maybe even Canada. So the fact that you think it looks like a bank flag, it's kind of logical considering the city's background.
I love it. If there's a reason for the symbolism and people really take it in, it can have all kinds of design qualities to make it. But as long as people love it, that's all I care about. Like, even if you love your ugly flag, just love it, fly it. I'm all for it.
Well, let's see how much you love this ugly flag. Oops, I shouldn't say that. Let's see how much you love this one. This is the city of Mississauga, which is a big municipality right next to Toronto, just to the west. Incorporated in 1974, not that long ago. What do you see? What do you like? What do you not like?
Well, again, don't like the words. Don't need them. Like, if the symbolism is working, you don't need words. So let's get rid of those. I think the shield is actually pretty good. The escutcheon. I mean, it's really common to take the like a city shield or a city seal and put it on a flag. I think that this one is stylized enough that it could kind of work on its own as a flag, but you could also break apart those little pieces of symbolism and use them in the flag, differently, rather than just putting it on a blue field. I mean, this is what, it's pretty common to take a shield or a seal and put it on a blue background, so you're not really distinguishing yourself very much as a city when you do that. If you look at the flags of the 50 states of the US, half of them look like this. So if you really want to stand out, like, get rid of that blue field and play with some of the elements in your escutcheon and see what you get.
Well, speaking of blue fields, let's see if you like the flag for the city of Markham any better. Markham is just north of Toronto. It's got a couple of iconic Canadian things there, a beaver and a maple leaf right in the middle. But I'm guessing you don't like the words and the numbers on there too much.
Totally. I just take that maple leaf and beaver and just put that right there on the flag and get rid of all the rest of it, and you'd be good to go.
Okay. We're going to go a long way north now. This is Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is only about a 24-hour drive from the studio I'm in right now. And Thunder Bay has a famous mountain called the Sleeping Giant, which is in that flag, and the maple leaf is there, and then a yellow sky and blue water. What do you like? What don't you like?
I think this one's pretty fascinating. I've never seen it before. To sort of interrupt the maple leaf with the mountain is interesting. I don't know if it like 100% works on me, but I think I could warm up to it for sure. If people dug it, it doesn't really sort of violate any of the sort of flag rules in any particular way. It uses a few basic colors. Their shapes, they're easy to remember and draw. I don't think you would exactly know the shape of the mountain. Like, if you were to draw it from memory, like, would you get the peaks exactly right? So that's a little bit odd in terms of symbolism. Like, I'm kind of confounded by it, but at least it's interesting. I'm into it.
Well, I think I've heard you say in the past that every bad flag has a good flag somewhere inside it trying to break out. Is that one example of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the other ones you showed with seals and shields, those definitely, like, you can break the symbols apart and use them to make a really effective flag. This one, I think I just had to sort of look at it more. Like, if the people of the city were into it, I'd be like, yeah, I think you're right. I think it actually kind of works. Okay,
let's do one more, and this would be the flag of the capital city of the whole country. That's Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It is, for those listening on podcast and who can't see it, it's sort of blue on the left half. It's kind of, what would you call that on the right? What color is that?
It's kind of a minty green, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Green.
Yeah. And then sort of a swooshing O in the middle for Ottawa. Okay, what do you think of that one, Roman?
I think it's beautiful. I love it.
Really?
I really do. It's unusual. I had never seen it before. I mean, I think that, I know it's an O, for a word, but it's so stylized that, it doesn't really bug me. I'm into it.
I don't know for a fact that this is the case, but it makes sense. The three sort of swooshes to the left of the O, they do kind of evoke the Parliament buildings, with the middle one being the Peace Tower. I wonder if that's there, or maybe I'm just reading into it.
Hey, if you're reading into it, it's there. That's what I say about flags. I think it's great. I'm into it. This is a top city flag as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, cool. All right. I gave you the heads up at the very beginning of the interview that I might ask you a couple of really bizarre, quirky questions when we get to the end. Roman, we have got to the end. So here they come. Okay. Are you ready? Your name
Shoot.
is Roman Mars. Is that your real name?
I mean, define real. It's.
Were you born with it?
I was not born with it. It's sort of a shortened version. Roman's my grandfather's name, so that is my first name. My birth name is something else that I'm not going to tell you. But it's a shortened version of Mars is like a shortened version of that name.
Okay, in which case that answers my second question. And I had people ask me this, they say, is that his real name? That was question one. And the second question, when people heard you were coming on, they wanted to know was, are you related to Bruno Mars? But I guess we know the answer to that now.
No, unfortunately not. I wish I had his talent.
Well, he's got talent in his area and you've got talent in your area. I'd say it's a wash.
Kind of you to say.
Roman, it's really good of you to join us here on TVO tonight. The 99% Invisible City is your newest contribution to bookshelves everywhere. And we should also say that you were part of the Hot Docs Podcast Festival in late January, and all the content from that is still available on their website at hotdocscinema.ca. Take good care, Roman, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And that is the agenda for Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. As the fiscal picture of the country continues to suffer under COVID-19, tomorrow we're looking at a program that's been around for 60 years and is called The Glue That Keeps the Country Together. Want to know what it's called? Tune in tomorrow. Also, with the U.S. canceling Keystone XL, we'll consider what's ahead in the pipeline debate here. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The Agenda is always on. To catch up on conversations from this week or any week, visit our website, tvo.org/theagenda, or our YouTube page at youtube.com/theagenda. It's all there for whenever you want to watch.